Rounds Academy. Today I'm going to be taking a look at creating an NPC, basically a Demon Witch, very powerful, evil, kind of boss type creature. I was inspired by creating images again using generative AI tools, and I come across this like witch-like thing, and I got to thinking about it that witches are kind of usually in some sort of pact or some kind of arrangement where they get their powers from. So with the Chat GPT tool, I made an NPC stat block. I did give it some instruction, like, how to uh, basically kind of the concept I was going for. And the other thing I gave it was this template that I use in a lot of my videos. If you guys aren't aware, I put this in the links at the end of the video. This will be available, and it's in some of my other videos. But basically, this goes over the formatting for the D&D 5e NPC import tool, and this isn't available in all rule sets, so sorry about that, but there's not much I can do. Some rule sets have their own utilities, but in this case, this is for NPC stat blocks. And what I'm doing here is I'm going to take and import the text. So there's a tool down here at the bottom, and on the left is a stat block, and then on the right is like all the notes, background, anything extra. So that's the tool I'm going to use, but I use this framework here, this stat block, the good example, and copied and pasted this into ChatGPT, and then I also make commentary on this, and it shows the differences in how stat blocks might look depending on your source or where you copy it from. So a lot of this stuff down here is incorrect. The stuff above here is properly at least to a format that Fantasy Grounds will parse and recognize. One little comma's out of place, or if these ability scores are in a different format, or you don't have a period after each one of these traits, that's going to throw off the whole thing. And then it's just going to frustrate you. So you got to get used to kind of learning what to look for if you're going to use the import tool. You can always hand enter the content if you don't want to use that. Or you can take like an existing witch in this case and modify it, and it makes it so much easier and quicker. But once you understand how to use the import tool, it's like just about instantaneous. The only thing that really takes work, I think, in Fantasy Grounds, once you understand the utilities, the text formatting, where things are at, is the artwork. And that, no matter what you do with that, that's not going to get any easier. So that's always going to take time. So usually when I try to help people learn the platform, one of the first things I do is say get like an outline of the stuff you want to make. Doesn't have to be perfect, but at least give you an idea of the content. Then organize that, and then take that and break it off into pieces. So that way, if you have a big project, you'll get a lot more done. You'll save a lot of time. However, if you're only doing one thing, then you do it however you want. But if you're doing like 3 or 4 or more, I would definitely figure out some sort of way to do this. Now, I've kind of made my own discipline and my own sort of feng shui on how to do it, process. That takes some time to develop because you got to kind of get your mind wrapped around Fantasy Grounds and around organizing your work. And I think that's an important aspect, especially in content creation, conversions, or even if you simply want to modify something and you get this inspiration to kind of make your own stuff for homebrew. So it's important to kind of spend some time with the platform and the tools that you need to make the stuff, because that's another thing. And that's kind of outside of Fantasy Grounds. So there's not much you could do about that other than to practice and get good at it. So or don't do it at all and just use the content that comes with your modules that you buy. I mean, that's the reason why you do it, is for convenience and to already have the stuff there so you're not spending hours doing it yourself. But I like to kind of dig in a little deeper into the platform and really take advantage of the power of Fantasy Grounds. So this may not appeal to brand spanking new people, but at least you get an idea to see what some of the capabilities are, the actual honest work that goes into it, and then also some of the tricks and tips and shortcuts. So those are things that you'll learn over time. And, I don't expect anyone to know this stuff or remember it if you don't use it very often. So now I'm going to go ahead and take a look at the stat block. So I've already got it kind of figured out here. It took me a few iterations to get it to format it properly. So I'm going to take this stat block and I'm just going to left click and drag. I'm in the Chat GPT browser window right now. I do have that up, but it's probably too small to see it. But right now I'm copying everything over, and I shouldn't copy over the background. So the tactics, those sort of things, all that stuff should be separate. So when it gets down to the legendary actions, I'm going to keep those and put those aside. So I'm going to hit copy and paste on the left here. And if you want to see what this is going to look like, you can right click and go to clean up text, and that's going to get rid of extra lines and stuff. It kind of cleans up the text a little bit, makes it a little bit easier for you to detect and read, like if this stuff is going to be right. And see, it placed the background here, which I didn't want. So I'm going to delete that. And that's why I do this, so that you can check to make sure that it's not giving you the wrong information and that the stuff is in the right place. So I already found an error that may have, I'd have to do it over essentially. So now what I'm going to do is take the background, copy and paste that. So that put it in the wrong order, but it's okay. I dealt with it. So I'm going to go ahead and paste that on the right hand side. And normally I start it up here at the top, and I'll recopy and paste her name up here, even though it gets repeated again. And then you start formatting this stuff. Like this is going to be Control 2, which is going to make that header. So there's like Control 1 through 6. Each one of those does a different type of formatting if you select the text. So, you have like bold and italicized and underlined. Those are still regular word processing commands for Windows. So those are pretty easy, but it's the Fantasy Grounds related ones that will help you in the long run once you learn those. So I recommend you find a list of those and start practicing them, and maybe tape it to your monitor, and pretty soon it just becomes second nature, and you'll be able to breeze through conversions and creating content a little bit quicker. I wouldn't say it's easier, but it doesn't take as much time once you get your hands on it and get a handle on how to use the platform. So this is just going to be probably a refresher for some of you. Some of you guys probably know this stuff, but it is definitely important to consider this. So anyways, I use this template on our Fantasy Grounds Academy website blog. Like I said, I'll put the link there, and this kind of gives you an idea of how that formatting should be. And this isn't really something that Smiteworks would focus on publicly. This would be more like sort of like a developer's thing, but I think it's important for the average user to know eventually, because you're going to want to make modifications, and you're going to kind of want to understand how it works above and beyond just what's given to you. So I'm going to close that out, go back to Chat GPT. So now that I have this stuff, now I'm going to grab the other content. Here's the tactics and the appearance. So what I want to do here is kind of amend that down here at the bottom. Right click, go to clean up text, and then I'm going to make bold on these sections here. And normally I don't want to sit here and bore you and give you all these details, but we are focusing on just this witch. And one of the things, other than importing a stat block, is to create the story, the reason why everything is the way it is, and how did she become a witch and all this other stuff. So I'm also going to talk about maybe looking at the loot that you might get from her. So whether it be in her lair or on her person. So what I like to do here is, as you generate content, I found that it's easier if you go and make some notes. So I'm going to create a new note, and I'm going to number it just in case. And I'm just going to put Demon Witch. That's essentially what this is. And then for loot, we're going to research this later. And this might be some items that you would include in your, in your NPC stat blocks. And here's a section for minions. So I want to do that and hit copy. And then I'm going to put paste over here. So this would give you an opportunity to potentially add these to her encounter, or even to her stat block, to make it easier for you when you run this adventure and you're not scrambling as much. And then I had an item here, a loot item for an addition, and this is called the Doll of Torment. It's like a voodoo doll, and basically this thing's pretty gnarly. So I'm going to put that in my notes as a potential item. It doesn't mean I'm going to use it, but at least I have some, a premise for it, backstory, all that stuff. So we'll get into that later, possibly. But for right now, the Demon Witch was inspired by this image that I have in my assets. So I wanted to show you that. So I added this in to Fantasy Grounds. I haven't added it to the campaign yet, but this is the preview image of it, and I thought this would make a really cool image, and I might make a token out of it later. But essentially, if I want it to become an image record, it'll say create map record, but it just means images or map. So this is a sewer encounter, so I want to change this to... So last week I did some sewage creatures, so I want to say infernal and abyssal encounters. I think since I'm doing this a lot in a lot of my content that I've made, what I'm thinking about is possibly making my own monster manual, because I'm doing all the work. I might as well get something out of it. So I might look into that, make sure everything's SRD, and not copied from the originals, and that kind of thing. But so what we're gonna do is make this section here, and then I'm gonna say create map record, and it's gonna put that over there. So now it's an image that I can use in my campaign, and I can share this with my players. I might get a version that doesn't say Demon Witch, or I might modify the image, but I thought this was pretty fitting for her character. It looks pretty good. This was created by a program. I think it's based off of ChatGPT. It's not actually ChatGPT, but I could make something like this in ChatGPT. But this program, it gave me, it's a, what was it called? Ideogram or something like that. But it gives you more control, and it does a lot better with text. So if you have a mixed media where you have images and text, it does a pretty good job. And I don't have to goad it as much as I would with like Mid-Journey is even worse for trying to do text. So it can do it, but it constantly gets it wrong. This one gets it right like 99% of the time. So that's why I'm using it. Anyhow, so this image is something I might share with my players, or just might use this for inspiration. In this case, we'll put this hideous creature back up here in the corner. And then here's our notes. Close that. So we got our notes there. Close the asset window. We're getting ready to import the NPC. And I wanted to make sure. Yeah, see, I don't have a section here yet. So I want to call this, we called it Infernal and Abyssal NPCs. That should be good enough. Okay, so now that we have that, I'm going to take this, click import, and Bob's your uncle right there. That's what I'm talking about. So when you get good at doing this, or get practiced with it, this stuff will work. It'll just do it. Once you get, I use ChatGPT to help me with it, but once you understand how it's supposed to work and what it's supposed to look like, it makes it easier to use this tool. It's just like a one-stop thing. So this is a pretty tough creature. What is this, a CR12? Man. It says humanoid tiefling. I don't know if I would have made it a tiefling, but that's fine. It makes sense. And then your notes section looks pretty good. So this is all the notes for this particular campaign or group here. So that's that looks pretty good. This is all the background and stuff to run it. So let's talk about the witch a little bit here, the Demon Witch. So background on Lady Veratrix, the Dark Vessel. So she was one time just a standard tiefling, and even though she has, blood, demonic or abyssal blood, she had kind of embraced her background, and she went ahead and accepted a pact with the demon. So once a gifted and ambitious witch, Veratrix was known for her mastery of dark magic and her relentless pursuit of power. Her quest led her to the demon lord Karzas, who promised her unimaginable strength in exchange for her soul. Over time, the demon lord consumed her entirely, leaving her a hollow vessel for his will. Lady Veratrix now exists as a fearsome agent of corruption, her mind twisted and her body transformed into a grotesque reflection of the demon's power. So it's kind of like she doesn't have much of her old self left, and the demon kind of took over, and that's why she's a demon witch. So this says that even through this, she relishes the causing fear and despair in her enemies. So she's basically she's trying to, kind of bolster her own power. And I think that's important because she wants to basically kind of top her game. And she's trying to work through that by getting more power from this demon. So she generally she likes to cause fear and despair. She begins her encounters by using her aura of despair and witchfire to scatter her foes, following up with Hellfire Bolts from a distance. She uses Soul Drain as a devastating finisher or when her temporary hit points are depleted. Lady Veratrix is not above retreating if Karzas senses that the fight is unwinnable, vowing to return and exact revenge at a later time. So it makes sense. She'll flee from the battle. Lady Veratrix is the embodiment of demonic corruption. Her once human features are now twisted with the influences of Karzas. Her skin has a sickly pallid hue, and her eyes burn with a sinister red glow. Large curling horns protrude from her forehead, a clear sign of her infernal pact. Her hair is long, gray, and wild, framing a face marked by deep lines of age and malevolence. She wields a blood-stained dagger, ready to strike at any moment. Her robes are tattered and dark, blending into the shadows that seem to follow her every movement. So then it just goes into the summary of the stat block. So it looks pretty good. I mean, I'm pretty happy with how this kind of stuff turns out sometimes. And then if you got pictures and art, you can put that here. I'm not going to go into that today. That's a lot of extra work. But I wanted to talk a little bit about some of the extras that you might make to make this encounter noteworthy, and you will already have the content built. So regardless of where you place it, the setting or the game that you're going to use it in, you'll have a lot of the assets built. So one of the things is loot. So you might have the Bloodstained Dagger. It's +1, and it has an additional 1d6. It's kind of malevolent. There's the Cursed Amulet of Karzas. It's an amulet infused with dark magic. You gain resistance to fire damage, but you're vulnerable to radiant damage. So I like the aspect of balance. It also has subtle influences. It kind of pushes you towards malevolent actions. There's a Grimoire of Infernal Magic. It's a spell book with rituals and spells. It says that you have to have a DC 15 Wisdom saving throw, or you result in short-term madness, which I think is kind of a cool touch. And in the Ring of Shadows, you can cast invisibility once per day. However, each time it's used, there's a 10% chance that you will instead be transported to a random location in the Shadowfell, which I think that was kind of a cool thing. It would be kind of hard to play that. I might lower the chance to like 5% out of 100. But for minions, you might consider Infernal Hounds, some Shadow Cultist, or both. Possessed Peasants, so maybe some vassals of hers that she has, either blackmailed or under her thumb, or maybe she seduced them at one time. Whatever it is, they kind of turn out like zombies, and basically that's what they are. And then the flesh golem, kind of like your Frankenstein thing that she's put together with her victims. And then I started to work on the voodoo doll of torment. So you may not use all this stuff, but it's just some inspirational stuff and a starting point. So if you want to build the assets, treasure tables, and all that stuff, you have some stuff to work with. So the doll has its own story. It was created by Lady Veratrix herself, using the remains of those who dared oppose her. So little bits and pieces of the voodoo doll were built upon the things that she got from her victims. And then it kind of goes into how do you use it. It can be a powerful tool for a villain, or it could be a tempting but dangerous artifact for the players. It can also serve as a plot hook. Perhaps the party is hired to destroy it, or maybe they need to figure out how to use it without succumbing to its dark influence. So basically, that's a big motivator and a plot hook. So there's a lot of stuff you can do with NPCs and the backstories and all that. So anyhow, I wanted to share this with you. I was working on this earlier. I don't want this to be a big drawn-out video. I did show how to import, and it showed you the artwork that inspired it, and I showed you some of the tools that I used, and then also some of the planning and prep involved. So I got ChatGPT helping me create ideas for content for the loot, the minions, plot hooks, and then you can kind of go from there and decide how much of this you want to develop. But at least you have it, and if it needs to happen, at least you're not starting from the very bottom. You have some content. So anyways, you guys, happy Friday. Have a good weekend. Happy Memorial Day. Or is it Labor Day? Yeah, it's Labor Day. Sorry. And all of you, I hope you have a good day off.